They had 72 hours to decode something impossible. March 17, 1943, German intelligence intercepted 847 Allied communications in a single day. What they found in message number 423 made their best cryptographers physically sick. Stay to see the revelation that ended Nazi Germany's faith in victory forever. 1432, Central European Time, Bletchley Park transmission routed through 7 Allied stations. The Wehrmacht's Enigma specialists had cracked thousands of British codes before. This one was different. The mathematics didn't add up. They ran the calculations 17 times. Same impossible result. But what they didn't know was that Allied intelligence had been feeding them false victories for 8 months. Colonel Hans Weber stared at the decoded message in the basement of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht building in Berlin. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sickly shadows across walls lined with filing cabinets containing Germany's deepest secrets. The smell of stale cigarettes and desperation filled the concrete bunker that had become his world since October 1942. Production numbers, supply chains, troop movements. But the scale, it defied everything German command believed about Allied capabilities. 50,000 bombers. Not 5,000, 50,000. The number kept repeating in different contexts, different fronts, same impossible scale. Weber had spent 14 years analyzing enemy capabilities from the Spanish Civil War through Poland, France, and Barbarossa. His mathematical mind had correctly predicted Soviet resistance duration, British convoy losses, and American industrial mobilization timelines. But these numbers suggested his entire career was built on miscalculations that killed German soldiers. His coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, the ceramic cup bearing lipstick stains from his secretary who'd fled Berlin the previous week. His hands trembled as he cross-referenced the decoded intelligence with German production reports spread across his metal desk like autopsy findings. The contrast was devastating. While German factories struggled to produce 800 aircraft monthly, working triple shifts with teenage apprentices and foreign laborers breathing toxic fumes in windowless buildings, Allied production lines operated at 60% capacity and still outproduced Germany 8-1. Every bolt, every rivet, every sheet of aluminum told the same story. Germany was fighting a war of scarcity against enemies drowning in abundance. Weber's analysis revealed the mathematics of German delusion. Messerschmitt factories operated 18-hour shifts producing 45 fighters weekly. Meanwhile, a single American plant in Marietta produced 67 B-29 bombers weekly working 8-hour shifts. German workers collapsed from exhaustion building individual aircraft, while American workers went home for dinner after assembling fleets. Then everything changed when they cross-referenced captured American documents. The captured papers came from a downed B-17 over Hamburg, blood-stained and partially burned, reeking of aviation fuel and death. Lieutenant Morrison had been 23 years old, the same age as Weber's younger brother, who died at Stalingrad. Morrison's navigation charts contained production schedules for Boeing, Consolidated, and Douglas aircraft plants that made Weber's head spin with their casual impossibility. Seattle alone produced more bombers monthly than all of Germany combined. And Seattle was just one city among dozens manufacturing American air power. Detroit converted automobile plants to aircraft production in 90 days. Willow Run produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. German aircraft production required cannibalizing existing planes for spare parts, while American factories threw away surplus components. But that wasn't the worst part. The production schedules were marked minimum wartime output, expandable to 300% on 90-day notice. Germany was fighting an enemy that was barely trying. Weber discovered American industrial flexibility that defied German understanding of manufacturing limitations. Ford's B-24 production line could switch to Sherman tank production in 6 weeks. General Motors aircraft plants could convert to artillery production in 10 days. American factories operated like mechanical organisms that evolved faster than German strategists could comprehend. If you're feeling sick to your stomach thinking about this reality, hit that subscribe button because the numbers get impossibly worse. Weber's hands shook as he compared intelligence from multiple fronts. German estimates, Allies producing 2,000 aircraft monthly. Decoded reality, 8,500 aircraft monthly, 4 times their highest projection. American factories were operating at 60% capacity, while German plants operated at 130% capacity by working people to death. They could triple production overnight if threatened. Meanwhile, German aircraft production required cannibalizing existing planes for spare parts, melting church bells for aluminum, and conscripting children to rivet wings in freezing factories. They had been fighting a ghost war, while their enemy held back 75% of their strength. 200 kilometers northwest, in Sector 7 Alpha of the Atlantic Wall, Colonel Ernst Hoffmann personally supervised the construction of 847 concrete bunkers spanning the French coastline. Each position represented months of backbreaking labor by French workers and German engineers. Hoffmann had studied every successful Allied landing from Gallipoli to Sicily, analyzing tactical failures and engineering solutions. 80 millimeters guns every 200 meters with overlapping fields of fire. Tank traps extending 3 kilometers inland, designed to channel Allied armor into kill zones. Reinforced concrete walls 3 meters thick, capable of withstanding direct hits from battleship guns. Ammunition storage facilities buried 8 meters underground. Communication tunnels connecting defensive positions to ensure coordination under bombardment. The concrete was still curing when British intelligence photographed every single position from reconnaissance flights that went undetected. Hoffmann spent sleepless nights positioning artillery to maximize killing fields, calculating optimal angles for machine gun nests, reinforcing weak points with additional concrete salvaged from demolished French buildings. He positioned minefields to channel Allied forces into overlapping fire zones, tested firing solutions against mock landing craft, trained gunners to engage targets at specific ranges. 2 years of meticulous defensive preparation by Germany's best military engineers using concrete that could have built 50 tanks instead. What they didn't know was that Allied intelligence had been observing their countermeasures since January 1943. British aerial reconnaissance catalogued every German defensive innovation within 48 hours of completion. Photoanalysts in London studied German concrete thickness using specialized cameras, identified ammunition storage locations through thermal imaging, mapped underground tunnels connecting defensive positions using acoustic sensors that detected construction vibrations. Allied engineers designed specific countermeasures for each German innovation before the concrete finished curing. Shaped charges optimized for 3-meter concrete walls. Demolition techniques tested against identical defensive positions built in Allied training facilities. Assault tactics practiced on exact replicas of German fortifications. Hoffmann built a fortress. The Allies built the siege engines before construction finished. British intelligence possessed construction blueprints for Atlantic Wall fortifications before German commanders received their copies. German defensive innovations were countered by Allied solutions designed in parallel with German construction. Every German tactical advantage was negated by Allied preparation that anticipated German thinking. Hoffmann's masterpiece defenses would face enemies who knew their exact specifications, firing angles, ammunition storage locations, and structural weaknesses before the first Allied soldier landed on French beaches. Meanwhile, 400 kilometers east in the suffocating Berlin bunker, Weber's analysis continued through the night as air raid sirens wailed overhead. Allied shipping losses, German U-boats reporting 400,000 tons sunk monthly. Kriegsmarine headquarters celebrated these victories with champagne toasts and ceremonial dinners where officers wore dress uniforms and ate real beef while civilians queued for turnip soup. Admiral Dönitz personally commended U-boat commanders for devastating Allied supply lines, awarding Iron Crosses for successful torpedo attacks that supposedly crippled Allied logistics. German newspapers proclaimed U-boat victories proof of superior naval tactics and German technological superiority. But the decoded Allied logistics told a different story: actual losses under 100,000 tons monthly. The Kriegsmarine had been reporting fantasy victories, while Allied convoys operated with 85% safe passage rates. German submarine crews died believing they were winning a war they were actually losing 4-1. For every actual Allied ship sunk, German reports inflated the number to 4 fictional victories that existed only in propaganda and officer commendations. Weber pulled out captured British Admiralty documents from Operation Torch, pages that smelled like seawater and cordite, stained with salt, that reminded him these weren't abstract numbers, but real battles where young men died for mathematical miscalculations. British naval intelligence tracked every German U-boat position within 12 hours of deployment using technologies Germany didn't know existed. Radar systems that detected submarine periscopes at impossible ranges. Sonar arrays that tracked underwater movement through acoustic signatures unique to individual U-boats. Radio direction finding that pinpointed German communications faster than German operators could encrypt their messages. Allied convoy routing avoided German patrol areas with surgical precision, while U-boat crews endured weeks underwater hunting empty seas. Allied merchant ships followed protected lanes that German commanders never knew existed. German submarines patrolled predetermined killing zones, while Allied convoys sailed through corridors of safety designed by computers that calculated optimal routes. The hunters had become the hunted without realizing the roles had reversed. U-boat crews reported successful attacks on Allied shipping, while Allied shipping lanes operated with assembly line efficiency. German torpedoes hit decoy vessels filled with concrete, while real convoys delivered supplies through undefended corridors. U-boat victories existed primarily in German imagination, while Allied reality continued uninterrupted. Weber discovered the scope of naval deception through captured Allied communications that discussed German U-boat operations like weather reports. Allied naval intelligence knew German submarine positions, patrol schedules, torpedo loads, and fuel levels more accurately than German submarine command. But what happened next broke everything they knew about the war's trajectory. Message 423 contained casualty reports from Operation Torch that contradicted every German assessment. Rommel's Africa Corps intelligence estimated they'd inflicted 50,000 Allied casualties during the North African campaign. German propaganda proclaimed these losses proof of superior Wehrmacht fighting capability and tactical innovation. Soldiers died believing their sacrifices wounded a bleeding enemy that would eventually succumb to German military excellence. The decoded documents revealed actual Allied losses, 8,200 casualties, while German Africa Corps suffered 89,000 casualties fighting an enemy that barely noticed the resistance. For every German death, the Allies lost 1/10 that number. German families received death notifications for sons who died inflicting casualties that existed only in German imagination. Africa Corps veterans who survived Rommel's campaigns discovered they'd been fighting ghosts while real Allied strength remained untouched. The numbers don't lie. Germany had lost 400,000 men in North Africa, believing they were trading blows with a bleeding enemy. Instead, they'd been shadowboxing while the Allies built an unstoppable war machine. For every German killed, the Allies lost 1/10 that number. For every German tank destroyed, Allied factories produced 12 replacements. While German tank crews scavenged spare parts from destroyed vehicles, sleeping in frozen foxholes and eating horse meat, American assembly lines produced complete tanks faster than German crews could count the wreckage. Weber's calculator couldn't process the industrial disparity that condemned German soldiers to fight impossible mathematics. German tank production peaked at 600 monthly units, using every available steel ingot, skilled worker, and piece of machinery in the Reich. Factories operated 24-hour shifts, with workers sleeping on production floors, breathing toxic fumes, dying from industrial accidents that weren't reported to maintain morale. Soviet production. Sindal's 200 tanks monthly from factories evacuated beyond the Urals, operating in sub-zero temperatures with minimal resources but unlimited determination. American production, 2,000 tanks monthly from converted automobile plants that hadn't existed 2 years earlier, staffed by workers who went home to heated houses and full meals. 3-to-1 disadvantage and growing exponentially every month. But the industrial mathematics revealed something even more devastating. Allied production acceleration curves suggested they were just beginning to unlock their potential. American factories were learning, optimizing, scaling production methods that would double output again within 12 months. Ford's tank production efficiency increased 340% between 1942 and 1943. Chrysler's aircraft engine production improved 280% using assembly line techniques borrowed from civilian manufacturing. Germany had reached maximum production while the Allies were warming up. German industrial capacity operated beyond sustainable limits, consuming resources faster than they could be replaced, working people to death in pursuit of production targets that remained inferior to Allied minimum output. Meanwhile, Allied factories operated well within capacity limits while continuously improving efficiency through technological innovation and workforce optimization. If these numbers are making your head spin, smash that like button and tell me, how do you fight mathematics with courage? 1515 Kit. Weber called an emergency meeting with Admiral Canaris, head of German military intelligence. The Abwehr chief arrived wearing the same uniform he'd worn for 3 days straight, dark circles under his eyes like bruises, the smell of schnapps barely masking his exhaustion and growing despair. His office felt like a morgue, where German hopes came to die one classified report at a time. The decoded intercepts painted a picture of Allied strength that made German victory mathematically impossible. But Canaris had suspected this reality for months. Based on fragments of intelligence, Weber was now confirming with devastating precision. Canaris poured himself a glass of schnapps with shaking hands, the bottle clinking against crystal in the silent bunker that smelled of fear and approaching defeat. "Show me the naval production numbers," he whispered, as if speaking louder might make the reality more real or summon bombers overhead. But what they discovered about Allied strategic reserves made their situation hopeless. Liberty ships. Weber had never heard the term before March 17th, but Allied intelligence discussed them casually, like mentioning the weather or daily bread rations. The production numbers were staggering beyond German comprehension. 2,700 cargo vessels completed in 1943 alone. Each ship carried 10,000 tons of supplies across oceans that German U-boats could barely patrol with their dwindling submarine fleet. German U-boats celebrated sinking 200 Allied vessels annually, while American shipyards launched 7 vessels daily. For every merchant ship sunk by German torpedoes, the Allies built 13 replacements. While German submarine crews endured months underwater hunting individual targets, eating rotten food, and breathing recycled air, American welders assembled entire fleets faster than the Kriegsmarine could sink individual ships. The mathematics of attrition favored the side that could replace losses faster than they occurred. Weber discovered Allied shipbuilding acceleration that defied German understanding of industrial capability. Henry Kaiser's shipyards reduced Liberty ship construction time from 230 days to 42 days, using assembly line techniques borrowed from automobile manufacturing. German shipbuilders struggled to complete single vessels using traditional methods that required months of skilled craftsmanship, while American yards launched completed ships every 6 hours using modular construction and prefabricated components. German naval strategy assumed limited Allied shipping capacity based on traditional shipbuilding timelines. The reality was unlimited Allied shipping production using revolutionary manufacturing techniques that German engineers couldn't replicate. American shipyards operated like mechanical organisms that learned and evolved. Kaiser's Richmond Yard No. 2 assembled complete Liberty ships in 4 days and 15 hours using techniques that eliminated bottlenecks through parallel construction. German shipyards required 8 months to complete vessels using sequential construction methods that created production delays at every stage. Allied shipping production exceeded German sinking capacity by margins that made submarine warfare strategically meaningless. The decoded messages revealed Operation Overlord's true scope through logistical discussions that treated impossibility as routine administrative detail, not the limited channel crossing German commanders expected based on Dieppe and other small-scale operations. A simultaneous 5-front assault involving 4 million troops, supported by logistics networks that required more coordination than German forces possessed across all theaters. While German intelligence tracked maybe 500,000 Allied soldiers in Britain, the reality was an invasion force larger than Germany's entire active military, distributed across multiple fronts. They had been preparing for a firefight while their enemy assembled for total war. British supply requisitions listed ammunition requirements for Operation Overlord that exceeded German comprehension. 500,000 tons of explosives for a single campaign. Germany's total explosive production for 1943, 180,000 tons, including everything from artillery shells to grenades to demolition charges. The Allies planned to expend 3 times Germany's annual production in a single campaign lasting maybe 6 weeks. American factories produced more ammunition in 1 month than German plants could manufacture in 6 months, even operating beyond capacity and melting down civilian items for raw materials. Every bullet fired by German forces was irreplaceable, salvaged from defeated units or manufactured from scrap metal. Every Allied bullet was one of millions manufactured daily in factories that operated below capacity and could double production immediately if threatened. Weber calculated Allied firepower advantage with growing horror that made his hands shake. In grid reference 5478, German defensive positions along the Atlantic Wall mounted 1,247 artillery pieces. Impressive fortification by any measure, representing 2 years of concentrated defensive construction using Germany's finest engineers and limited steel resources diverted from tank production. Allied fire support for Operation Overlord, 8,800 naval guns, 12,000 aircraft, and 2,400 mobile artillery pieces. Before a single German soldier fired a shot, they'd be outnumbered 7-1 in firepower alone. German gunners would face 21,000 Allied weapons with 1,200 German guns. The mathematics weren't tactics, they were execution. German defensive positions would be obliterated by firepower concentrations that exceeded the total Allied bombardment of Germany throughout 1942. Allied naval gunfire alone exceeded total German artillery firepower. Allied aircraft carried more ordnance than German ground forces possessed. Allied mobile artillery could match German defensive firepower while advancing across contested terrain. German defensive strategy assumed firepower parity that allowed tactical skill to determine battlefield outcomes. Allied firepower superiority eliminated tactical skill as a variable by ensuring German positions would be destroyed regardless of defensive competence. Then, everything changed when they realized their intelligence had been compromised from the beginning. Colonel Weber's final report contained the most devastating revelation of all, discovered when he cross-referenced decoded intelligence with German operational planning. Every major German operation since 1941 had been anticipated by Allied intelligence with precision that suggested comprehensive penetration of Wehrmacht communications. This wasn't lucky guessing or superior analysis. This was systematic mind-reading. The Battle of Britain. RAF knew German bomber formations 2 hours before they crossed the Channel. British fighters waited at optimal altitude and position for interception. Engines warmed, ammunition loaded. Pilots briefed on exact German approach vectors, including altitude, speed, and target selection. German pilots reported unexplainable British prescience in positioning defensive forces exactly where German attacks would concentrate. Operation Barbarossa. Stalin had exact German troop positions, unit strengths, and invasion timing 3 days before the assault began. Soviet defensive preparations matched German offensive plans with mathematical precision impossible through conventional intelligence gathering. Red Army positions anticipated German breakthrough attempts before Wehrmacht commanders finalized their orders. El Alamein. Montgomery positioned his forces based on captured intelligence that included Rommel's complete battle plans, acquired a week before the German offensive. British artillery pre-sighted German assembly areas with coordinates derived from German planning documents. Allied forces prepared counterattacks against positions Rommel hadn't yet decided to attack. Germany hadn't just been losing battles. They'd been fighting enemies who could read their minds. Weber's investigation revealed the scope of Allied intelligence penetration that made German operational security meaningless. Ultra-decrypts provided real-time German communications to Allied commanders faster than German recipients received encrypted messages. British codebreakers read German messages faster than German recipients. While German officers waited for encrypted communications to reach headquarters through radio networks, Allied commanders already knew German intentions and deployed countermeasures. Every German tactical surprise had been anticipated through systematic decryption. Every strategic deception had been decoded before implementation. Every operational secret had been compromised during planning phases when German commanders believed their communications were secure. Allied intelligence superiority wasn't limited to code breaking. Photo reconnaissance flights mapped German positions daily using cameras that revealed details invisible to ground observation. Signals intelligence tracked German radio communications and triangulated transmitter locations. Human intelligence networks provided real-time German operational information through networks that penetrated Wehrmacht command structure. Tell me in comments, how do you fight a war when your enemy knows your plans before you finalize them? But the intelligence advantage represented only one dimension of Allied superiority that multiplied every other strength exponentially. The decoded messages revealed systematic technological advantages that surpassed German theoretical limits. Radar systems that detected German aircraft at ranges German pilots considered impossible using detection methods German scientists couldn't replicate. Sonar that tracked German submarines through ocean depths German commanders believed provided perfect concealment. Allied anti-submarine technology detected underwater movement through acoustic signatures unique to individual U-boats, tracked by computers that calculated submarine positions more accurately than German navigators. Allied technology didn't just match German capabilities, it surpassed German theoretical limits using scientific advances that German research couldn't achieve. 1642 Seat. Admiral Canaris read Weber's report in complete silence, his office feeling like a tomb where German hopes came to die, one mathematical calculation at a time. Outside, Berlin civilians queued for bread rations that provided 1,200 calories daily, while Allied soldiers ate 4,000-calorie field rations. Allied bombers assembled for night raids. The German air defenses couldn't stop using interceptors that lacked fuel for more than 30-minute patrols. The mathematics were undeniable. Germany controlled 12% of global industrial output, fighting enemies who controlled 88% of global industrial output. Even with perfect tactics, maximum efficiency, and supernatural German military competence, German forces would be overwhelmed by sheer material superiority within 18 months. But that wasn't the calculation that broke Canaris's faith in victory. Allied manpower reserves dwarfed German estimates by catastrophic margins that made long-term resistance suicidal. German intelligence believed they faced 15 million enemy soldiers across all fronts. Conservative estimates, based on observable deployments and captured documents that represented minimum Allied strength. The decoded intercepts revealed actual Allied strength: 47 million troops, either deployed or in training across global theaters. Soviet reserves: 12 million additional troops beyond frontline deployments, training in camps beyond German reconnaissance range, using equipment supplied by American Lend-Lease. American military: 16 million personnel with another 8 million in reserve training, supplied by industries that German bombers couldn't reach. British Empire forces: 11 million troops across global theaters, supported by dominions whose resources Germany had never calculated. While Germany conscripted teenagers and grandfathers, their enemies had barely tapped their recruiting potential from populations that volunteered faster than training facilities could process recruits. Weber discovered the most chilling detail buried in Allied logistics planning that revealed the scope of Allied demographic advantages. American training camps processed 100,000 new recruits monthly, using standardized methods that maximized training efficiency through scientific optimization. German training facilities, operating at maximum capacity beyond sustainable limits, processed 20,000 monthly recruits while simultaneously replacing combat losses that exceeded recruitment rates. German military strength decreased monthly, while Allied strength increased exponentially, using population reserves that seemed unlimited. They had been fighting World War III, while Germany prepared for World War I. The manpower mathematics were inescapable, regardless of German tactical superiority or individual soldier competence. Germany deployed every available male between ages 17 and 45, pulling workers from essential industries and conscripting foreign laborers to maintain production levels that barely sustained military operations. Allied forces represented voluntary enlistment from populations that could double their military size without affecting civilian production or economic stability. German commanders fighting 200% deployment against enemies fighting 35% deployment of available manpower. Weber calculated Allied demographic advantages that made long-term German victory impossible regardless of battlefield performance. American military age population: 40 million males eligible for military service. German military age population: 18 million males, including those already killed, wounded, or captured. Soviet military age population: 35 million males beyond current deployments. British Empire military age population: 25 million males across dominions and colonies. Combined Allied military age population: 100 million potential soldiers. German military age population: 18 million actual soldiers, including those no longer capable of combat service. Even if every German male fought perfectly and inflicted maximum casualties, the mathematics favored populations that outnumbered German strength 5-1, with replacement rates that sustained indefinite warfare. Allied populations could absorb German maximum effort while maintaining civilian economies. German population couldn't sustain current military deployment without economic collapse within 18 months, regardless of battlefield outcomes. But the intelligence that destroyed all hope of German victory appeared in the final decoded message of March 17th. The most devastating number appeared in message 847. Allied atomic research that rendered conventional military calculations obsolete. German nuclear program employed 47 scientists working on theoretical weapons development in a single university laboratory. Limited funding diverted from conventional weapons that provided immediate battlefield advantages. Minimal government priority because atomic weapons seemed impossible using available technology. Manhattan Project employed 130,000 personnel building actual weapons across multiple secret installations, consuming more electricity than entire German cities. While German physicists debated theoretical possibility in academic seminars that met twice monthly, American engineers were manufacturing impossibility in industrial complexes that operated 24-hour shifts using uranium enrichment processes that German scientists considered impossible. The decoded messages referenced gadget testing, scheduled for July 1945. Weapon yields equivalent to 20,000 tons of conventional explosives delivered by single aircraft. A single aircraft carrying destructive power equal to 200 Allied bombing raids. The atomic mathematics eliminated every German advantage simultaneously. Superior tactics became irrelevant against city-destroying weapons that rendered battlefield skill meaningless. Defensive fortifications became obsolete against atomic fire that vaporized concrete and steel. Manpower reserves became meaningless against weapons that killed by tens of thousands in seconds. German military excellence meant nothing against weapons that ended wars instantly. In 8 months, while Germany exhausted its final reserves fighting conventional campaigns, America would deploy weapons that ended wars in seconds. Weber's calculations revealed the atomic timeline that made German resistance mathematically suicidal. First atomic weapons would be ready by summer 1945, regardless of German resistance or tactical success. If Germany surrendered by December 1943, atomic weapons wouldn't be used against German cities because the war would end before deployment. If Germany continued fighting, atomic weapons would vaporize Berlin before conventional Allied armies crossed the Rhine. The choice was surrender or atomic annihilation. Atomic weapons represented technological supremacy that eliminated military skill as a variable. German tactical excellence, defensive engineering, and individual soldier competence became irrelevant against weapons that destroyed cities instantly. Atomic warfare made conventional resistance meaningless because atomic weapons couldn't be countered by traditional military methods. 1730 CET. Weber's intelligence summary reached Hitler's bunker through Canaris's direct report, carried by motorcycle courier through bombed streets where German civilians searched rubble for food, while Allied supply convoys delivered abundance to enemy forces. The numbers painted an undeniable reality. Continued resistance would cost Germany 2 million additional casualties, while delaying inevitable defeat by perhaps 6 months. Surrender offered the possibility of preserving German civilian population and infrastructure from atomic destruction. Negotiated peace might save Berlin from becoming radioactive ruins where German culture died with German people. The mathematics favored immediate surrender to minimize German casualties and preserve German civilization. But what Hitler did with this information changed the nature of the war's final phase forever. Weber waited 3 days for strategic response to his intelligence assessment that proved German defeat was mathematically certain. New defensive preparations based on Allied capabilities. Resource reallocation to address critical vulnerabilities exposed by intelligence analysis, diplomatic overtures to negotiate surrender terms that preserve German lives and infrastructure, something acknowledging mathematical reality that could save millions of German lives. Instead, Hitler ordered the intelligence report classified Geheime Reichssache and destroyed. Copies burned in the bunker's furnace that heated Hitler's private quarters while German civilians froze in unheated apartments. Witnesses reassigned to combat units where their knowledge would die with them on battlefields that intelligence proved were strategically meaningless. Instead of negotiating surrender based on mathematical reality, Nazi leadership chose to fight a war they knew was unwinnable. The calculation that could have saved millions of lives was buried to preserve the regime's final months of power. Hitler's response to learning German defeat was mathematically certain. Classify the mathematics and continue the war rather than face personal accountability for strategic mistakes that doomed Germany. Personal survival took priority over national survival. Regime preservation mattered more than German preservation. Nazi leadership chose to sacrifice their people rather than sacrifice their pride or face consequences for decisions that made German defeat inevitable. Weber's report estimated the cost of continued resistance with German precision that proved prophetic: 800,000 military casualties. 4 million civilian deaths and complete destruction of German infrastructure, including cities, factories, and transportation networks that represented centuries of German civilization. Fighting a hopeless war would kill more Germans than surrender while accomplishing nothing except postponing Nazi accountability. But surrender would end Nazi power immediately, while continued war preserved leadership for additional months of absolute authority. The regime calculated that 2 million German deaths were acceptable costs for postponing their own accountability for strategic incompetence that made German defeat mathematically inevitable. The mathematics of power differed from the mathematics of survival. Hitler's cabinet received copies of Weber's intelligence analysis, but chose to suppress mathematical reality rather than acknowledge strategic failure. Göring dismissed aircraft production disparities as temporary Soviet advantages that German technology would overcome. Himmler ignored manpower calculations as defeatist propaganda that undermined German fighting spirit. Goebbels classified atomic intelligence as enemy disinformation designed to weaken German morale. Nazi leadership preferred comforting lies to devastating truth that required acknowledging strategic incompetence. Weber's intelligence analysis contained one final calculation that revealed the moral mathematics of Nazi decision-making. Immediate surrender would preserve 2.2 million German lives, 500,000 German homes, critical infrastructure for post-war recovery, and international sympathy for German civilians who suffered under Nazi leadership. Continued resistance would preserve Nazi leadership positions for 8 additional months of absolute power before inevitable defeat and accountability. The choice was mathematical. The decision was personal. German lives versus Nazi power. They chose personal survival over national survival and condemned their people to 8 more months of devastation that accomplished nothing except Nazi leadership preservation. April 1943. Weber was reassigned to Russian front combat duty, officially for requesting additional resources for intelligence analysis, but actually for possessing knowledge that contradicted Nazi propaganda. His mathematical genius was wasted in a Stalingrad foxhole, where calculations couldn't stop Soviet bullets or warm frozen German soldiers who died believing they were winning a war that intelligence proved was lost. He died at Kursk in July, one of 400,000 German casualties in a battle fought, despite intelligence proving it was strategically meaningless. Weber's final letter home mentioned numbers that don't lie and calculations that leaders won't accept. His replacement burned his files without reading them, ensuring mathematical truth died with the mathematician. Canaris was executed in April 1945 for plotting against Hitler, 1 month before Germany's inevitable surrender that Weber had calculated 18 months earlier. His final words reportedly included reference to intelligence that predicted everything the regime refused to acknowledge. Canaris died, knowing Weber's calculations had been perfectly accurate, while Nazi leadership remained perfectly ignorant. The men who understood German defeat was mathematically certain died before they could witness that inevitability. Weber's replacement burned his files without reading mathematical truth that could have saved millions of German lives. Military intelligence returned to optimistic assessments that supported continued resistance by ignoring realities that contradicted Nazi propaganda. German command resumed planning operations based on fantasies rather than mathematics, because fantasy supported continued fighting while mathematics demanded immediate surrender. Truth died with the men who calculated truth. Other German intelligence officers who possessed fragments of Weber's analysis faced similar fates. Major Heinrich Müller, who calculated Allied shipping advantages, died in Berlin, fighting that intelligence proved was hopeless. Captain Fritz Sommer, who analyzed Soviet manpower reserves, was executed for defeatist calculations that accurately predicted German defeat timelines. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, who documented Allied technological superiority, died defending positions that his intelligence proved were indefensible. German intelligence achieved perfect accuracy and perfect irrelevance simultaneously. March 17, 1943. The day German intelligence realized victory was impossible. But impossibility didn't stop the killing. It made the killing meaningless. While Weber's calculations gathered dust in classified files, 3.2 million additional soldiers and civilians died for a cause their own leaders knew was mathematically hopeless. German intelligence achieved perfect clarity about their situation and perfect irrelevance to their leadership's decision. Weber's ghost calculations proved accurate with supernatural precision that vindicated mathematical analysis over political wishful thinking. German defeat, predicted May 1945, occurred May 8, 1945. Atomic weapons, predicted summer 1945, deployed August 1945. German casualties, predicted 2.2 million additional deaths, actual casualties, 4 million including civilians, killed by strategic bombing and military personnel killed in hopeless battles. The mathematics were perfect. The mathematicians were powerless. Allied intelligence intercepted Nazi reactions to Weber's analysis through communications that revealed leadership terror at mathematical reality. Hitler's personal physician documented psychological episodes following intelligence briefings. Göring increased morphine consumption after reviewing production disparities. Himmler expanded execution lists to include defeatist mathematicians who calculated inconvenient truths. Nazi leadership chose murder over mathematics when reality contradicted ideology. Post-war intelligence analysis revealed that Weber's calculations were conservative compared to actual Allied advantages. American atomic program employed 130,000 personnel, as Weber calculated, but Soviet atomic program employed additional 50,000 personnel that German intelligence never detected. Allied manpower reserves totaled 47 million, as Weber calculated, but Chinese forces provided additional 5 million troops that German intelligence never counted. Weber underestimated Allied strength while perfectly calculating German defeat. The most dangerous intelligence isn't what your enemy doesn't know. It's what your leaders refuse to accept when the numbers don't lie, but pride won't surrender. Mathematics met madness on March 17, 1943, and madness won the argument by classifying mathematics as treason while sacrificing millions of lives to preserve personal power. Weber died knowing German defeat was certain. Hitler died refusing to acknowledge what Weber calculated 18 months earlier. The difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence calculates reality, wisdom accepts calculation. Germany possessed perfect intelligence and imperfect wisdom, and the gap between knowing and accepting cost 3.2 million lives that died for leaders who chose ignorance over truth. The most perfect intelligence is perfectly useless when power refuses to face reality. Modern intelligence analysts study Weber's case as an example of analytical perfection rendered meaningless by political cowardice. His calculations remain classified in German archives as examples of intelligence accuracy that leaders ignored because truth demanded accountability they refused to accept. Weber's mathematics proved that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one you're fighting, it's the one giving you orders. Subscribe for more stories where mathematics met madness, where intelligence can be both perfect and perfectly useless, when power refuses to face reality, and discover what happens when the people who understand truth have no power to act on truth. Because sometimes knowing everything changes nothing when courage to act on knowledge is absent, and learn how mathematical certainty becomes meaningless when political survival matters more than national survival.